Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to this incredible No Kings Interfaith training. Welcome, whatever tradition you are from, including secular humanists, atheists, and all of the above. Welcome from whatever community you feel a part of. You are welcome here. This is a moment in America that's going to take all of us. So, welcome as people come into this training. My name is Reverend Paul Brandeis Rauschenbusch. I am so honored to be the president of Interfaith Alliance. I'm also part of the host committee of No Kings. And so we are preparing for March 28th, which is the next No Kings, No Kings 3. It is so important that all of us show up fully as ourselves, as part of our community, bringing all sorts of people with us from our own tradition, faith tradition, and background, as well as people from different faith traditions that we can show up together. And we're going to learn about all of that tonight. But my role here is really just to welcome you. So I'm going to keep on saying welcome, welcome, welcome. Again, my name is Reverend Paul Brandeis Rauschenbusch, and I'm so glad that you are here with us. We are so honored that you are spending time with us, and we know that this is going to be so valuable to feel powerful in this moment. And I really, I got a chance to speak at the State of the Union, the People's State of the Union last night, and my real message was the people have the power. We, the people, have the power for our democracy that we need right now. Tonight, we're so honored to have an interfaith No Kings training. We're going to have amazing speakers from different perspectives that are going to join together. And really, at the end of this, you will feel more powerful and knowledgeable and capable of showing up wonderfully for No Kings on March 28th. So I think I've done my job. My job was to welcome you. I'm so glad that you're here from all parts of the country, from all different traditions. And my pleasure now, my honor is to turn this over to my colleague, Adam Friedman, who is the director of campaigns at Interfaith Alliance, who is going to be your guide throughout the next 90 minutes. And he's going to lead us in an incredible training and knowledge building and skill building and I think a deepening of all of our commitments to March 28th, No Kings 3. So, Adam, thank you for all you've done to make this a great evening and take it away.
Thank you so much, Paul, Reverend Rauschenbusch, our amazing president and CEO at Interfaith Alliance. I also want to thank everybody who is on tonight's webinar. We have over 400 folks who have already joined, and we saw over 1,000. I think we hit 1,500 registrants. So we know that these numbers will continue to climb. This training will be recorded and available on YouTube, on our website, and the No Kings website, so you can continue to revisit this training. And I also want to thank everyone who's saying hi in the chat. Please keep going. Keep letting us know where you're calling in from. I'm so heartened to see folks from all over the country. I'm seeing Jersey, I'm seeing Texas, Alabama, Kentucky, California, Oklahoma, Arizona. Thank you all so, so much, not only for being on this evening, but for leaning in and saying no kings. And I want to lift up some language that Paul conveyed to our team yesterday, which has really stuck with me, which is that this year is a special year in our country's history because we are marking the 250th anniversary of not having a king, right? That is what this moment means. And so with that, I just want to set the table a little bit before I turn it over to the amazing managing director of Indivisible, Mary Small, and share with you that tonight, as Reverend Rauschenbusch mentioned, is for people who are activated on the axis of their core faith or belief, their traditions of conscience, to come share space with one another and also receive some very tangible training about how we organize. We come together as a community and show up together, not just for No Kings 3, but to continue to lean in and mobilize as people of faith and diverse belief through the months to come. I also, to do the due diligence, want to emphasize that No Kings 3 is a nonpartisan event. It is a nonviolent demonstration and a legal demonstration. And so we can answer and we'll speak more to what that means throughout the evening tonight, but just want to say that up front. I'll also, right at the top, mention that we're going to be talking about a number of different uh, approaches tonight, ways to lean in. And if you want to continue to receive trainings, to stay informed, please make sure that you are going to interfaithalliance.org for more info, going to nokings.org/trainings for all of the amazing trainings that will be coming up that you can watch as an attendee. And I know some of those are required for hosts, so please look out for those. Lastly, I just want to give a shout out to everybody who's observing Lent and Ramadan Mubarak to folks who are observing Ramadan right now. I know for folks on the East Coast, you've just broken your fast. For folks who are further out west, you are looking forward to your iftar this evening. And in this season of reflection, of leaning into our sacred traditions to really focus our minds and our spirits on what is most important and deepen our relationship with our faith. I want to say thank you for leading the way with the values that I know we're all leaning into this moment as we approach March 28th. And so, with that, I am so grateful to Mary Small, the managing director of Indivisible, for joining us this evening. And of course, Mary, for everything you continue to do to lead this movement in a time such as this. Mary, I'll turn it to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Adam, for that warm introduction. And thank you all of you for being on this call. I'm so excited to be here with you tonight. As Adam said, I'm the managing director at Indivisible, but I'm also really excited to be here with fellow people of faith. I'm originally a Baptist from North Carolina. Shout out to all of the North Carolinians in the chat introducing yourselves. I saw you, and it warmed my heart, and am now a proud United Methodist. But really relish the opportunity to speak with other people of faith about the intersection of the struggle against authoritarianism and how we show up as people of faith in this moment. So I'm going to walk through a few things while I have the mic tonight. So the first is why No Kings 3 now? Why are we doing that right now? One of the ways that we understand the moment that we are in is that we are in a period of attempted authoritarian consolidation. When a wannabe authoritarian tries to knock out competing power centers in order to consolidate and concentrate power with themselves. What we have seen over the last year is some real attempts and successes there where leaders of of institutions and elites have crumbled and surrendered and been complicit with this administration. But we have also seen the remarkable bravery and resilience and courage of everyday people who have pushed back against that. And in this moment in time, that consolidation has not happened. That window is still open. And keeping that window from closing is one of our central jobs for this year, all of us together. But doing that requires ongoing signs of a disciplined opposition, of defiance, of efforts that make political repression backfire. That's going to take a lot of different forms. Mass mobilization, a mass day of protest like No Kings is not the only answer to that, but it's one component piece. The holding the window against authoritarian consolidation open, continuing to build that mass public defiance that shows a growing opposition to an authoritarian regime, that's going to take many forms, from neighborhood by neighborhood organizing to protect immigrant neighbors and neighbors of colors from ICE dragnets. We saw beautiful work along those lines happening in the Twin Cities. Rapid response mobilizations like ICE Out for Good. I know so many of you participated in those in January. And then also these bigger, more planned mobilizations that build over multiple weeks. And part of the reason that that's also an important part of this kind of bigger recipe that we're all building together is because you may have noticed that we live in a really strange media ecosystem and information environment where so many of us are inside of these self-contained information bubbles that are really hard to puncture. And it can take time for a message to get from one bubble to another bubble to another bubble. And so sometimes these more planful protests that build over several weeks can help us get into more bubbles than we might otherwise. And so taken all together, those can help keep the window open. And then the other piece of this is what I mentioned earlier about making sure that political repression backfires. This is a punitive, vindictive regime. They go after their enemies in an attempt to scare them, to make them feel alone, to make examples of them so that the rest of us will hush up. It's our job to make that strategic logic backfire, to make sure that every overreach is broadcast and used for political education, and that rather than scaring us into silence, we come back bigger and stronger and more defiant. That's what we're building towards on March 28th. And part of the kind of, again, bigger recipe of how we continue to build this. If you were part of Hands Off last spring, you were part of 3.5 million people who joined to say no, hands off to all parts of our communities and our families and our neighborhoods. Then No Kings, the first No Kings in June with 5 million people, then the second No Kings in October with 7 million. Looking ahead to the end of March, we're going to get even bigger. And so the sense is that there are more of us than there are of them. We are growing, and this is a movement and a moment to be a part of. That's also part of this stitched together cloth of tactics that are all going to be used to hold open this to fight back against authoritarian consolidation. Okay, so that's why No Kings in this particular moment. Another question that's sort of at the forefront of this gathering tonight is why faith communities matter in confronting authoritarianism. And they matter precisely especially in the US context, like even more so than in some other contexts, because religion is already central to our politics, including the reality that for a lot of white evangelical Christian institutions are sort of already aligned with authoritarian movements here. And so it's not a choice about whether or not religion and being people of faith is in the mix in these moments. It's not peripheral to the struggle, but it's one of its key arenas. And so it's within that context that we ask why faith communities matter in confronting authoritarianism. And it's because they shape people's moral imagination. They define social trust, and they show a willingness to act together. So first, faith communities carry deep moral language about human dignity and justice and truth and care for the vulnerable. Authoritarian movements, as we've seen play out over, the last 15 months, rely on dehumanization and fear and the normalization of cruelty. Faith communities are critical for providing a counter story, a counter narrative to that, one that insists on the inherent worth of every human. So the deep moral language is one reason. The second is actually much more practical. Faith communities are trusted existing networks of people. Part of this is back to those bubbles that I was talking about before, but also about just the mechanics of how you organize large numbers of people and grow over time. Faith communities gather people regularly across generations and often across lines of class or race or politics, and that makes them uniquely positioned to share information, to model courage, and to mobilize collective action, especially when other civic institutions are under pressure, which is absolutely something that we're seeing right now. Third, faith communities practice habits that authoritarians struggle to suppress, like solidarity and mutual aid and truth telling and moral courage. Rituals and relationships and shared values, these are all the rich textures that help people resist isolation and fear, which those two things, isolation and fear, really are the key tools of authoritarian control. And then finally, faith communities can have historic credibility. Again and again, from the US civil rights movement to pro-democracy movements around the world, faith leaders and congregations have helped legitimize resistance and really moved it into the mainstream and something that it's actually hard to repress. They've helped protect vulnerable people, and they can call society back to those shared values. So in short, authoritarians thrive when people feel alone and afraid and morally uncertain. Those are the conditions that they're aiming for. Faith communities matter because they help people remember who they are, or in my tradition growing up, as we said, who and whose we are, what we believe, and that we're not alone, which is really the foundation for collective courage. Okay, so that's sort of all of the theoretical scaffolding for why we're doing No Kings, why it matters to do it specifically as people of faith. And now I get to turn to some really practical stuff about how faith communities can plug into local No Kings 3 efforts. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to want to do is to discern what your role is on the 28th. And you've got several options. I would argue that those include participating visibly, organizing others to join, volunteering as part of the infrastructure of the event, or even hosting an event. So I'm going to take each of those in turn. And I just saw the note to go a little slower, and so I will slow down. Thank you for that note. So the first of these is participate visibly. And I would argue that every person on this call can do this one. We just covered why it's particularly important for people of faith to be part of struggles against authoritarianism and to be visible in those struggles, because as people of faith, we carry a particular thing it's an ingredient in that overall recipe that's really important. So figure out how to make your participation in a No Kings event on the 28th visible. Maybe that's a shirt with the name of your congregation or an overtly religious message. I will say it might be cold, so just think about that. It doesn't help a lot to wear a shirt if you've then got a jacket over top of it. So think about something that's going to be on the outside and actually showing. It could be about what your sign says. That could be faith over fear. That could be the crown with like the X with some scripture reference or other reference to holy text. It could be the words "No Kings" written inside of a stained glass style design. Anything that overtly connects your faith to the message of No Kings. But the point is not to blur into sort of generic secular morality. You want to be visible and explicit as a person of faith in order to be adding that kind of ingredient. And if you're clergy, making that visible in your clothing or in the way that you're showing up is really helpful. Okay, so number one is participate visibly. This is something that all of us can do. Number two is to organize others to join you. We've got more than a month. We've got a month and 3 days. And so thinking about what we can do in that time period to bring more folks in. If you're part of a small group, you can text your small group tonight. Statistically, many of us share a faith with our families. You can reach out to your family tonight and say, I was just on this great call with Interfaith Alliance, and we were talking about planning for No Kings on March 28th. I'm really excited to go. Are you planning to go? Can we go together? Have you looked to see what events are in your area if you don't happen to live geographically close to your family? Does your congregation have a social justice committee? If they do, can you connect with them? Can you just reach out and make sure it's on their radar? One of my favorite tactics here is, could a contingent of folks from your congregation join up and then walk over to the No Kings event together so that you're visible as like a group? In addition to being really fun in my experience, for me with my home congregation of Foundry United Methodist Church, we've all got matching shirts and the kids all know each other. And it's just a fun little party to meet up and be with people who are known and then go be part of something bigger than ourselves in a really joyous way. Um, uh, but in addition to being fun, which it is, I can vouch for it, it's also strategically smart. Because if there's a group of you who are all together, who are all sort of visibly coded as folks of faith, it makes it more likely that folks will notice your presence and that it will be one more nudge in this big project that we're all in together of shifting the public perception of how people of faith are showing up into this particular moment. So whether it's texting some folks, talking to your neighbors, talking to your family, talking to some folks in your congregation, organizing a contingent to all go together, whatever the thing is that makes sense for you, almost everyone can organize 3 more people to go with them. And so I would say these first two are really for everybody. Participate visibly on the 28th and organize others to join you. You've got more than a month. There's absolutely time to do this. The other two, I think, are real discernments for folks to decide whether or not this is what makes sense for you. So that can be part of volunteering to be part of the infrastructure of an event that's already existing, or if there's not a No Kings event in your area, to consider hosting one. So the way that you're going to do this, and forgive me for folks who are, have done this a million times and for whom you know this like the back of your hand. What you're going to want to do to look into this is go to nokings.org. That's nokings.org. Right now, there's about 1,400 events on the map. There's another 1,000 that are being vetted. So just to say, what is on the map right now is a lot. And also, there's going to be a lot more. So if you don't see something in your area, maybe give it a couple of days and check back again. But if you see an event near you and you're feeling called towards deeper participation, that's great. Here's what you should do. Register for that event. When you register for the event, you're going to get an email that confirms your registration for the event. In that email that you will get after you register, you're going to see a button that says contact the organizer. What you want to do is press that button and offer to help with whatever's needed. Or maybe you have a specific skill set that you want to offer. Maybe you know how to marshal, or maybe you have some first aid experience, or maybe you want to bring some water, or whatever the case may be. But that's the way for you to connect with your local host, if you're not already, and get plugged in to whatever volunteer infrastructure is happening, if that's something that you're feeling called to do. And then again, if there's not already an event in your area and you are feeling like maybe you want to host, you can also sign up to host an event. I will just offer a couple of reminders with love as you are coordinating with the hosts of these different events. The first is that everyone is a volunteer. The second is that everyone is doing their best. It can be really overwhelming as a volunteer to try to figure out how to host and coordinate and pull off one of these events. And so I would just ask you to reach out and offer to help with love, but also patience and compassion for tons of everyday people all across the country who are stepping forward into their civic duty in this moment and probably have a lot that they are juggling. And then my second piece of advice would just to lean towards over communicating for coordination, but to reduce bottlenecks where you can. So, for example, reach out and say, to go back to the example I was offering before, I'm with Founder United Methodist Church, and we're going to have a group meet up and walk over. We're meeting up at this location. We plan to be at the main event by Y time. Let us know if you have any flags on that, but otherwise, that's our plan. So you're not waiting on them to say yes, no. You're saying, this is my plan. This is how I'm contributing. But if you've got some feedback on that, let me know. Or I wanted to reach out and I wanted to help. Here's some things I could do. Let me know if any of those are helpful. But the more that you can offer ideas or concrete ways to support, rather than just generic, let me know if you need anything, the easier it'll be to match needs with gifts. And so we'll just offer those two gentle guidances. And then the last thing I will say before I hand it back over to Adam is I would implore you to make sure that you have done the prep that you need to ahead of time to show up in disciplined and strategic ways. Adam said this at the top, but I just want to reiterate it. This is a movement committed to strategic nonviolent action. This is a movement committed to strategic nonviolent action. So you should think ahead of time about how you will prepare to show up as your most regulated, grounded self. There are some trainings that are available to you that you can check out. If you go again to nokings.org, if you go to the training tab, so that's nokings.org/training, you will see there opportunities to get training in safety and de-escalation, in Know Your Rights. I know Interfaith Alliance is also providing some support on that front. But getting trained is a great idea so that if a counter protester starts yelling disruptive things or something that's been happening a little bit more recently, a right-wing so-called citizen journalist shoves a microphone in your face and won't stop even when you ask them to. Know ahead of time what your go-to plan might be, or just what are a few tools that you have in your toolbox. Are you going to walk away? Is there a song that you want to begin singing? Do you want to start praying? Whatever it is that's going to keep you regulated and grounded and make sure that you don't take the bait, know what that is ahead of time. I want to emphasize it is so unlikely that you will experience this. Across the thousands of mobilizations that we had with Ice Out for Good, No Kings 2 in October last time, across all of this, the overwhelming majority of protests remain without incident. And it's true that trained people, prepared people, handle stressful or emergent situations better. So be prepared. Think about what training would be helpful to you, grounding for you, and also for folks in your community. And make sure that you avail yourself of that over the course of the next month. So, to connect a couple of these pieces back together, I was saying everyone is able to identify 3 people in your life who you can bring with you. Maybe y'all go to one of these trainings together. Maybe you meet up in person and have tea while you're watching the training. Whatever it is that helps you build community and connection and organizing for the long haul, alongside using this as an opportunity and a hook to do so, is going to be good and additive in this longer term struggle that we are all part of. There's obviously so much more that I can say, but I will leave it there for now and turn it back over to Adam.
Thank you so, so much, Mary, not only for your deep and spot on insight as always, but also for all of your leadership through this moment, both on calls like this and for all that you're doing behind the scenes. I know that it is, we give up a piece of ourselves in doing this democracy work, and we do it for the love of the community that we're building together, the multiracial pluralistic democracy we're building together. So thank you so much. Um, I now am so grateful and excited to turn it over to our amazing colleague here at Interfaith Alliance, who is not only sharing a bit tonight about how we, as people of diverse faiths and beliefs, are experiencing authoritarianism and are uniquely able to give voice to the necessity of democracy, but she's also going to be sharing a couple of slides from a training that she's developed called Reimagining Interfaith. It's absolutely phenomenal, shameless plug. And I know that for folks who received our pre-event email, you're aware tonight is not just an exciting moment where we're offering some hands-on training around No Kings, but also the formal launch of our mass training platform, which we'll be going through a little later this evening. If you're interested in getting the full 90-minute version of Maggie's phenomenal uh, kind of sample she'll be offering tonight, please, after this call, once you have that link, go onto our platform and you'll see in that top right corner, we'll go over this again a little later tonight. You can request this training so Maggie can join you virtually or in person and lead it for your community. And so, with that, I'm so grateful and honored to be able to introduce my amazing colleague, Maggie Siddiqui, our senior advisor.
Thank you so much, Adam. And it's so wonderful to be with hundreds of you this evening that are so passionate about No Kings 3. So just wanted to talk to you briefly about, when we say no kings, what are we pushing back against and why through interfaith alliances? And what we're pushing back against is, of course, an attempt to seize ultimate power away from people. And so, thank you, Adam, for putting up on the screen there this slide. What I've laid out there on the left-hand side of the screen is what that authoritarian agenda is like. It is already at play, right? It has already laid some ideological groundwork, fostering hate against different communities. This authoritarian agenda we're pushing back against involves an attempt to sow mistrust between and among communities, convincing each community that we are without allies and therefore we should fight for only our own interests, even sometimes at the expense of democracy itself. That might sound familiar to folks, seeing some of that play out. Minority groups are then scapegoated in different ways. We become fixated on one another at times as different communities rather than focusing on the real problems we need to solve together. And then while we're in the midst of pointing fingers at one another, there is an effort to then silence those of us that are, remaining critical of this agenda. And that has included, right, faith leaders, other community leaders, members of the press, and so on. So how do we counter this authoritarian agenda? On the right-hand side of the screen is how we can attempt to restore power back to the people using interfaith coalitions. So step one, expose these harmful ideologies, call out this authoritarian agenda, call out the hate, say no kings, and stand up for our 250-year-old democracy. And that second step, and why I have circled it there, is if sowing mistrust is key to the downfall of democracy, then our interfaith, multiracial movements have a powerful role to play in cultivating trust within and between communities. Because if we can find ways to cultivate meaningful solidarity that supports all of our community's safety and well-being, we will have taken a critical tool out of the tool belt of authoritarianism. And when we do this work that is not easy, but is so important, coming together across different identities and backgrounds, then we are able to effectively unite for courage, saying no kings with one voice and ultimately protecting our democracy. And so this is where our interfaith movements are so critical, right? I want to be clear. The two columns I laid out here, these are not about us versus them, right? This is about the spiritual and political threat of this moment that are despair and division, and the antidote that we can create through movements like No Kings, in which we create hope and relationships. So, because, what happens if we become so focused on only, maybe our own community self-interests, if we think we're alone and have no allies, right? First, we fail to reflect our own values, the values that call us toward the common good. And secondly, we allow these divide and conquer tactics to win. It is strategic for us to be engaged in complicated interfaith, multiracial coalitions to protect our democracy. So, how do we do this effectively? There's some excellent research by Dr. Allison K. Ralph that shows the power of truly multi-faith movements. And what she finds is that our efficacy in multi-faith movements actually lies in the fact that multi-faith movements bring together the strengths of both bridge building and activism. So many folks that do interfaith work are bridge builders at heart, right? They want to bring people together as they are. They are principally concerned with getting people to trust one another, ensuring that everyone feels like they belong. And for some bridge builders, that means they're not necessarily pushing anyone to change, but the goal is just to get everyone to be able to be together and belong. And others in this work see themselves as activists or advocates. They're pushing people in some way toward positive social change, right? They're recruiting and organizing people for the purpose of changing systemic policies and practices. And for some activists or advocates, recognizing those are not the same thing, that means they're often working with only like-minded people, right? But the power lies in the middle of that Venn diagram. And I suspect that many of you are here on this webinar because you are right there in the middle of that Venn diagram. Because interfaith efforts to affect social change have to live with the tension of both allowing people to exist as they are, to hold their own particular identities and values and where they are coming from, and to push that collective towards social change that then supports all of our needs. And that's what we really need right now in a context when there are these intentional efforts to drive us apart in order to consolidate power for a select few. I believe the work of bringing communities together across lines of difference in this way is absolutely critical to protect both the spirit and the reality of our democracy. We model democracy when we do this difficult coalition work. And I believe we must insist on being in solidarity with one another, even and especially when that is difficult to do, because democracy relies on all of us with our different identities and backgrounds having an equal say in what happens in our country and being able to work together to solve common problems. And so being in relationship and coalition with one another, it helps us find and realize that hope together. And I'm so grateful to the folks on this call today who are going to share with you next about how we put some of those ideas into action. What does that look like to do some of that interfaith movement building leading up to No Kings 3? So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Adam.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Not only for sharing just a piece of the amazing presentation, conversation that you're having with faith communities across the country, but as always, for your wisdom and leadership. Truly, it's an honor to be able to work with you. Now, before I turn it over to an incredible colleague who is exemplifying this work on the ground, I just briefly wanted to share a bit about who we are in this moment to kind of underscore what Mary and Maggie reflected on. So, for those of you who have been involved in No Kings in the past or who have attended an Interfaith Alliance training, who broadly identify as part of this pro-democracy faith movement, and who have been on webinars like this before, this image probably looks familiar, right? This is an illustration of what we call, it was originally coined by Gene Sharp in the 70s, pillar theory, right? And we're not going to get into rehashing the theory of the pillars of support tonight. What I really want to emphasize is that um, leading theorists who are supporting the movement for multiracial democracy in the United States and across the entire world understand the power of faith as a unique and distinct pillar that has an essential role to play in not only protecting, but furthering and achieving our democracy together. Right. So just to quickly make sure folks who aren't familiar with this graphic know what they're looking at, on the left side of your screen, you see a triangle with some columns underneath. Right. This is kind of a representation of what an authoritarian power structure looks like. At the top, you have an authoritarian government, and we know that an authoritarian government cannot facilitate its agenda without support or adherence, compliance, whatever language you want to use from these different pillars of society. Right? What that looks like tangibly is uh, a government in power can say, we are going to institute tariffs, but it takes folks in the civil service to send the emails, to stamp the paperwork, right? Folks working at the docks, working at airports to institute the agenda, right? To institute these tariffs. Similarly, we've seen ICE deployment across the country, right? National Guard deployment. We know that it's not just somebody in a position of power saying this is what we're doing. It takes an entire pillar of society, an entire sector, with thousands and thousands of people saying, yes, wholeheartedly, we are doing this, or at least complying, at least saying, I am not going to stand up and say no, or I am not going to be behind the scenes gumming up the works. And so we are offering, as many of our allies, our colleagues, our partner organizations are, full 90-minute trainings on pillars of support, on strategic non-cooperation, which again is another approach that we know is critical in addressing authoritarianism in the United States. But for the sake of tonight, I want to emphasize two things. One, that we as a faith pillar are a crucial part of this movement for pluralistic multiracial democracy. And two, that we are not alone. And not only are we not alone, right? We know there are hundreds and hundreds of people on this call who are showing up through our shared values around democracy, around loving our neighbor, around welcoming the stranger. And we know that folks in all of these pillars are articulating the same vision for our country with the language that compels them, that calls them forward. And so when you show up at No Kings on March 28th, when you show up to the organizing meetings ahead of time in your local community, and when you continue to lean in after March 28th, day in and day out, I want you to not only understand intellectually this truth, but identify it as you look around the rooms that you inhabit. Folks are leaning in, not just from our faith pillar, but from the business community, from unions, even police, military, right? The civil service, media folks, lawyers, and judges. It's going to take folks from across the pillars of society to shift loyalty, to stand up and say no, to not comply, to not go along with the authoritarian agenda. And as people of faith, we do have a unique role to play, right? When we gather in our houses of worship at the organizing meeting, we are not just sitting with folks, as I mentioned before, who identify and are called because of their religious tradition or tradition of conscience. We are sitting with folks who also belong to all of these other pillars. And while we might be compelled or motivated to show up in faith-rooted spaces in our houses of worship for similar reasons, all of us in our kind of respective identities are going back to our respective pillars, whether it's showing up for work the next day at a small business, going to the union meeting on the weekend to have conversations with fellow workers on the line, right? Having conversations with other civil service folks who have experienced the impact of authoritarian cuts to the civil service, right? What we talk about in our religious communities when we organize and show up in person, not just during services in our houses of worship, but also in those basement meetings that are storied parts of the civil resistance, nonviolent civil resistance movements that have created change throughout US history, what we are doing is seeding a movement across these pillars. And so I just want to really emphasize that, knowing that we are not just showing up in a vacuum here across the axis of time, right? We are continuing to organize, and we are not showing up in a vacuum in the axis of space. We are showing up alongside folks who are activating their entire pillars, and we have a role to play in that. Now, to make this really tangible and center a lot of what Maggie just meant, we are setting the moral tone when we show up at No Kings 3. Right? Mary mentioned it's so valuable for people of faith and diverse beliefs to show up at No Kings recognizably as our full selves because uh, it ensures a few things. One, it ensures that we can model nonviolent courage, leaning into traditions that are often thousands of years old, which instruct us, command us to show up nonviolently and with a shared love of our community, our neighbors, the folks we know and the folks we don't. We know that when we show up as an interfaith community identifiably, we are not just a microcosm of pluralistic multiracial democracy. We are demonstrating what that looks like for everybody around us, who sees our form of public witness, exemplifying what democracy is for us and can be for our country. And lastly, as people of faith and diverse beliefs, we are leaders in following organizer guidelines from the folks who are all volunteers, as Mary mentioned, who have spent hours and hours, made incredible sacrifices to ensure that we have these moments of activation as a country. And we're also strengthening the coalition by ensuring that the faith pillar shows up. And so, in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to our amazing colleague, Reverend Chloe Breyer, the incredible leader of the storied Interfaith Center of New York. But first, I want to mention a few things that we can think about before, when we consider what the value is of organizing a pre-event faith gathering, right? We know that showing up to No Kings is crucial. We know our organizing before and our continued organizing after is essential. And our call to action tonight, especially for clergy and laity, for organizational leaders on the call tonight, is to host an interfaith pre-event gathering the day of No Kings. So instead of showing up with three friends, we're showing up with an interfaith community that spans 50 people from across houses of worship and traditions in our local geography. Right, so why are we encouraging this? Well, there are a lot of reasons, and the four I want to lift up before turning it over to Reverend Chloe are one, we're building the community that it takes to not only counter authoritarianism to fight for democracy, but to actualize multiracial democracy in our local community. We reclaim the faith voice when we show up in an interfaith capacity. We have seen, all of us on this call have seen, how the authoritarian regime in the United States has aimed to capture the faith voice and suggest that only a narrow interpretation of Christianity is valid and should be the law of the land. By showing up as an interfaith community, we are not only rejecting that, but we are setting the record straight. We are affirming that people of diverse faiths and beliefs are in the majority, and this is what America looks like. Sorry, I lost our slide there. Right, which brings us to affirming our vision for democracy. Right, we are the pluralistic multiracial democracy that we are aiming to achieve for everyone in our country. And centrally, we know that we are fighting for specific elements within that democracy that, while for many of us has not been a reality, is an aspiration we hope to actualize. Central to that is our First Amendment, not just the ability to speak our minds freely, to go out and protest, but also to freely exercise our faith, right? We are fighting for the separation of church and state that protects all of us as people of diverse faiths and beliefs to live freely as who we are in this country. And I'll just shamelessly plug that we have a great training module with our Vice President, Guthrie Graves Fitzsimmons, and an amazing attorney from the Knight Institute at Columbia to speak more about that. And then lastly, you might have heard the language of absorption, right? How are we bringing people into ongoing work after No Kings 3? There are going to be a lot of opportunities coming at the national level, and there are so many incredible local opportunities we believe can be showcased, not just at No Kings 3, but at a pre-event gathering where folks have the opportunity to chat with others, to interact directly with other organizers who might be at the stage at No Kings 3, but they can speak to face at a pre-event interfaith gathering. And so you're about to hear from Reverend Chloe Breyer, an incredible faith leader, organizer, strategist based in New York City, for two reasons. One, because she is exceptional in all the ways I've mentioned and more, but really centrally, because during No Kings 2, ahead of the activation in New York City, she planned, organized, executed an incredible, meaningful exemplar of what it means to gather as an interfaith community and show up to an activation together. I also, before I turn it over to her, just want to lift up how grateful we are to have the Interfaith Center of New York as an affiliate. We have 32 affiliates in our network, though it's growing every week. And as one of our strongest affiliates, we really look to Reverend Chloe to gain an understanding of how we can support local communities across the country in platforming voices of diverse faiths and beliefs and doing this work in the right way. And so, with that, Reverend Chloe, thank you for being here. Thank you for all the work you are doing. I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Adam. And thank you to Paul and everyone at the Interfaith Alliance for giving all of us affiliates an incredible network to amplify the local work that we have been doing. And I think what I'd love to talk about tonight just is the way in which our local knowledge is in some ways the key to our power. And I think this is not really it's really been true, certainly in New York, and I think in places like we've seen this in Minneapolis, we've seen this in other Chicago parts of the country that have owned their distinctiveness as a way of resisting the federal government. So that's really what I want to focus on a little bit in trying to offer the example of this pre-No Kings interfaith vigil that we did. And I guess to do that, just a word of introduction about the Interfaith Center of New York has been around now, gosh, for about almost 30 years. And as the focus of our work has been on grassroots and immigrant faith communities, engaging in civics education and also advocacy that lifts, sort of helps them to engage in the wider community as well as their own religious community. And that has taken up a great deal of intensity, as it did in so many parts of the country back in 2022 with the arrival of a lot of buses of people coming from Latin America, from West Africa. And the mosques in the Bronx were oftentimes their first port of call. Addresses that were given out at the border in California were then were the mosques on 221st Street, and that you'd get 100 or so people a night staying for at least a year and a half to 2 years. Those very same faith communities that help to feed, clothe, and get legal assistance for so many new New Yorkers are now turning around and having to do accompaniment as these new neighbors are being disappeared when they go to check in with their ICE officers and their immigration courts. So there's a lot of we see this going on in so many parts of the country. And I think I want to again just give the context of New York. So to do that, I'll go to the next slide. Is that something I can do, or is that something that Adam might be able to do? Yes. Okay. So this is a really big kind of back of the envelope sketch of what is the religious diversity of New York City, which really is quite exceptional, but it's not, it's a difference in kind, not, it's a difference in degree, not kind, as the, 1964 change of immigration laws completely changed the demographics of the United States. And so while we in New York still are majority Christian, we have so many denominations, storefronts, everything from the, St. Patrick's to the incredible diversity that exists not only among Christians but among Jews and among Muslims as well, Hindus, and then African traditional religions, and Sikhs, who also are such an important part of the fabric of New York City. And I think that sort of is what we've been working with, and trying to build relationships between these communities around shared concerns that then helps them integrate and kind of own their New Yorkness, and make the civic fabric of our city stronger. So I'll take the next slide, I guess. Yeah. Okay. So those are the numbers. These are the people. And as I mentioned, so much of our time in the last few years has been trying to support these smaller houses of worship, and ones where, there's a tremendous amount of pressure, and they, not the big houses of worship, are the ones taking in the strangers and caring for them. And so much of our work has been about, they won't even have like an industrial sized kitchen to feed 100 people a night for Ramadan at the iftar meals or something. But their Buddhist neighbor, who's also in the Bronx, might have that industrial kitchen, and in some cases has helped to feed people, because we all pitch in when there is a crisis. And I think what we're seeing now is exactly a crisis, which then gives us an opportunity to be better neighbors to one another. So that's again a little bit of the context that brings us forward to the present time. And in addition to being part of Interfaith Alliance, the Interfaith Center of New York is pitching in to an effort called Hands Off New York City, which is an attempt to really train masses of people, like hundreds and thousands of people, on not only knowing your rights, but also how to, what's the Fourth Amendment, and how can you stop your neighbors from being picked up without using violence, taking a leaf out of the pages of the folks in Minneapolis, but also other places around the country. I'll take the next slide. So when it came to No Kings, there's so much going on, and yet there is no substitute for coming together en masse. Like we want to, show up for our neighbors. We want our houses of worship to be welcoming places. But when it comes to getting out on the street, we all need to do that together. So here's what we do. We start with where we are. And when it came to the Interfaith Center of New York and some of our local partners, we had been meeting on a kind of regular basis in something called Multi-Faith Mondays, because we thought if there was a single place where we could show up on a regular basis, then all the, things being thrown at us could sort of be focused in a way that this would become like both a watering hole and also a time to speak publicly about what we are seeing. And so we sing together, we pray together, we reflect together, and it's a place where we pick up our phones together and we call our elected officials when it's time to pass, New York for all, or when we need our Schumer and Gillibrand to stand firm against the, funding of DHS when they already have $15 billion. So this was our sort of watering hole, and we thought, okay, we've got No Kings coming up, and so let's kind of convert what we have. In other words, this set of relationships, this time and place. Let's make this, fabric of a foundation that we have, and really have a feeder event into the No Kings March. Because if you don't maybe don't know the geography, but this is Columbus Circle, which is 59th Street. And actually it's a pretty, the actual march itself physically began only a few blocks to the south, and it was really a straight shot. So we knew we could have our, half hour, 45-minute vigil at 9:30 or 10 in the morning, and then literally walk together and join. And so we got to walk as a group. And if you've been in these big marches, that's so important because you literally cannot move oftentimes. So you really want people around you that you're happy to talk to for, or laugh with or sing with or what have you, for however long it takes you to get through the march. So that's the kind of context in which we started. And I'll take the next slide. So we also are, we got a bunch of big steeple churches and synagogues that we're in relationship with: Jewish Theological Seminary, Union Theological Seminary, the Episcopal Diocese of New York. I'm an Episcopal church. I'm an Episcopal priest, and help out at a church on Sundays. So this was our bishop, and I have to say that we're all about religious diversity. It's also very nice to have a bishop. There's something about the purple. I don't know, it really kind of, and he came, of course, with sometimes a bit more resources than a lot of faith communities have. For example, somebody to help with PR and whatnot. So, which is another advantage of being an affiliate with Interfaith Alliance, because you guys have been so great and generous with helping us all get the word out. So this was Bishop Matt Hyde, who's the Episcopal Bishop of New York. I'll take the next slide. So the other thing is, if the other thing that we start with, and we sometimes just overlook the obvious, we start with our relationships. And these, public vigils are, when they work, are outgrowths of pre-existing relationships that we have with the house of worship around the corner, with the actually with the police officer in the precinct, because often that's going to be the person who needs to get you your permit. So you can have some sound or something. It might start with in our case, again, it was like the seminary across the street from us, the neighborhood. Those are the relationships that we have and we need to build on. And oftentimes, we forget how powerful, just even if you're gathering on a set of steps in a public, building, you're giving a platform to people. And that's so critical. So, for us also, and I don't know, how true this is for other people, but, after we've had a really rough year in terms of interfaith work, a rough couple of years around Israel and Palestine, and, such passionate feelings. And, when these horrific things happen in other parts of the world, they really affect us right where we are. So there's been a whole, period of 2 years when it's been hard to get, certain religious groups to show up about anything with each other if there's another group in the room who they passionately disagree with. And I'm going to say that as one thing that we should not overlook is the possibility that we are now afforded an opportunity to rebuild some of the bridges that may have been really, fallen down because of geopolitics, because of the real nightmares of starvation, of murder that have happened in Israel Palestine. So I wanted just to, highlight that. And then sometimes, you think, well, there's a group that won't show up if we have this group. And I think always it's important to remember that circumstances change, and one must never think that the divisions that exist in the world are always set that way, because sometimes circumstances can adjust themselves, and you should just always ask, like, will you come? Will you come and be together? I know you disagree strongly with this, these things that these other folks have said, but will you show up anyway? Because this is something where we've got to, as the folks in Minneapolis said so clearly, we have to overcome our differences to fight ICE and to fight the authoritarian threat that exists in our nation right now. So I think with that, I'll take the next slide. And this was just the very kind of simple maybe it's not that simple, but it was our order of service. And I think this will look familiar to anyone who's sort of done a vigil at any time in any place, right? You keep it pretty simple, basic order of service. We welcome with song because that's where how people would gather. And we now have the Resistance Songbook, and in addition to all of our regular hymns and sacred music. We've got an introduction from somebody who knows why we're here, and what we're hoping to get out of our gathering together. You then can start with an opening prayer and follow it with a reflection of some sort. Then what we found at the Interfaith Center is getting people to stand together. One tendency we know is it can be, sometimes a bit awkward if someone is going on for a long time, as us religious leaders are wont to do, you know, to actually tell someone ahead of time that you got a minute, and that's really it. And that if you pull people together in groups, then they step forward and back from the microphone, and there's not a lot of like waiting around while someone comes up, and then interspersing with song, and then you've got your closing prayer. And again, these are all, in our case, people with whom we have had relationships. And at the same time, if you don't have relationships with people that you'd like to have relationships with, this is a good moment to go and make that introduction. And a vigil like the ones we're talking about can be a good excuse to say, look, we'd love to, I know we haven't worked together, but this is an opportunity. We'd love you to join us. So I'm probably at the end of my time here, but I just wanted to, if we've got some examples of different Hindu, Buddhist, um, Muslim, and Jewish prayers, which I'm happy to share later if there's an example, if there's an interest in that. But anyway, so we all know that we've got a lot of resources to fight authoritarianism in our respective traditions. So that's really it. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Chloe, not only for coming on and sharing some of your incredible work with us, with this big interfaith community tonight, but for all of the incredible work you continue to lead in New York and around the country. I just want to affirm for folks tuning in tonight that organizing a pre-event gathering is something that does not have to be a barrier, right? It can be an opportunity to lean in with your community. As Reverend Chloe mentioned, it can be an opportunity to build new relationships. We have a full month here to reach out to folks you haven't spoken to in a while, or to go back and nurture old relationships, right? We know that the past few years have been a unique challenge, to say the least, for interfaith communities across the country. And being able to say, I know we have our differences, like Reverend Chloe mentioned, I know we have our differences. There are differences we want to talk through. And in this moment, we know that there is a very real authoritarian threat. And we have an opportunity to come together and be pragmatic in showing up for our communities, right? And so, with that, I'm going to put up another slide here, which kind of gets into what that can look like tangibly. So, we know that in these past few months, in this past year, in the past few years, in the interfaith context, but in the American context broadly, uh, we have seen an unprecedented need, not just for community, but a real need to offset barriers to entry to make sure that every member of our community is able to participate. And we know that our houses of worship, our interfaith community, has a central role to play in ensuring that can happen. And so this is not by any means an exhaustive list, but I just wanted to offer some thoughts, some ideas here to start to get you thinking as attendees tonight as to how you can close that gap between people showing up at No Kings 3 and tangibly what they need to make that happen. So, just a few ideas. One, Coordinate carpools to and from your local No Kings event. Right? If you're hosting an interfaith gathering at a house of worship or community space, consider who in your community is also able to put their hand in the air and say, maybe I can't bring a platter, maybe I can't bring sign making materials, but I have a car, I can fit 3 people, and I'm going to drive them there, right? Especially as we think about the ladder of engagement, the different ways in which people can show up, especially for folks who are not in a position to say, stand for 2 hours at a direct action at a protest, right? Saying, I respect that. And I know you want to be involved. How do you feel about driving your vehicle, right? And bringing a few people to and from our No Kings action. It's a great way to get more folks in the community involved. Another thing to think about, I know I mentioned sign making. I know Mary mentioned sign making. We also have an amazing resource. If you go onto the link that our amazing colleague Eden put in the chat with our messaging guide, right, which is located on our No Kings 3 landing page, you can see all sorts of great ideas for signs that invoke the rich tapestry of faith traditions present that make up our democracy, right? Being able to offset that labor need, the cost of purchasing those materials, the stress of thinking through, okay, how am I going to get poster board and markers, sit down and make a sign? By giving people that dedicated hour, hour and a half before No Kings to come together as an interfaith community and work on some signs together, that's a great way to show up for your community. Right. Also ensuring, as I mentioned a little earlier, that we're thinking about how to keep the energy going and how to make sure everybody not only is showing up for No Kings, but has next steps. Right. We can ensure that that's something built into our interfaith pre-event gatherings by inviting local organizers who are already connected to our community or creating new relationships in this moment by connecting with those folks and using the urgency of the moment, the opportunity to bring interfaith community together as a catalyst for welcoming in those organizations in the community that have phenomenal ongoing work to keep our community safe. Right? Invite them in to the interfaith pre-event gathering. Ask them to share a few words. Ask them to come with a table and some materials. Make sure that folks who are going to see them on stage speaking at No Kings 3 also have the chance to chat with them ahead of time at your interfaith pre-event gathering. And lastly, uh, offer people something material to remember their involvement to when times are hard, when we have the news on, which is plenty challenging just to watch, let alone what we experience in our communities. Giving people something material to look on that gives them that energy, that nourishment, drawing from our deep spiritual traditions to push forward. That can be as simple as taking some pictures at your event and sharing them with your community. So, folks, if they're feeling isolated or alone, as we know is a real issue across our country, folks can look back to leaning in at No Kings 3, see a picture of their interfaith community gathering ahead of the activation, and know that they are not alone. They are surrounded figuratively in that moment and will continue to be surrounded literally when they're on the ground in person with a rich and diverse interfaith community. So, with that, I want to pause for a moment, pivot, and just offer a few things to keep in mind to remember when you show up for No Kings 3. And I will offer once again this necessary disclaimer that uh, everybody on this call is invited to attend future No Kings 3 trainings. No Kings 3 is going to put on an incredible training to talk through de-escalation and safety, know your rights, uh, especially for folks who are hosting events. You are being required to show up for additional trainings that'll walk through how to organize marshals and things of that nature, how to be in touch with different folks who have that de-escalation training, right? And for everybody on this call, know that that is a resource that is available to you at nokings.org/training. In addition to that, I'm going to lift up just a few principles right now that I want to make sure everybody on this call has in their back pocket to think about when you show up for in-person activation. And again, a plug, we have an amazing module that's only 15 minutes long as part of our virtual training platform from a close colleague, Reverend Dade Im at Faith in Action, who goes through in a deeper way, sharing some personal experiences these kind of core principles of de-escalation and of nonviolence. And so necessarily, I'll mention that the principles I'm about to talk through draw from a history of Kingian nonviolent teaching, and a few other amazing teachers who have led the movement for nonviolent civil resistance throughout our history. I want to lift up the 6 Ds, right? The 6 Ds of de-escalation, which you might be familiar with, right? If you find yourself not just at No Kings, and as Mary mentioned, it's very unlikely you will find yourself in this position at No Kings, but as you continue to engage in the future in this meaningful work, know that if you're confronted with a situation you feel you need to de-escalate, consider delaying, right? Engaging this person in a way where you can kind of prolong, stall to bring in folks who are in a position, like for example, a marshal at No Kings, to actively de-escalate, who has more training, more familiarity. Distract, another tactic to introduce. While you're going and getting that person, that marshal, at many No Kings activations, that person will be wearing an orange or yellow vest, or will be identified as a marshal. Delegate, right? Often we are in crowds of folks at these events, and there are different roles all of us can play to ensure that we're de-escalating a situation. Right? One person might engage to delegate. One person might identify some folks who might be particularly vulnerable, who might be getting harassed or something of that nature, and bring them away from the situation. Another person might go and get the marshal. Right? Consider how we delegate roles if we're confronted with a situation we need to de-escalate. Also create distance, right? If there's somebody who is behind a barrier and is shouting rude things, which we know is very unlikely to happen at No Kings, but can happen at some activations, just putting some distance in between you and them, or folks who are kind of facing the brunt of any verbal unkindness, to be generous, and that person who's sharing it is another tactic to consider. And finally, the sixth or the fifth D I'll mention is documentation, right? We know that having a record, ensuring that if anybody is showing up in a way they shouldn't, we have video or photo recording of that, especially if we need to send that to organizers after, is an important thing to hold. And then the last D I'll mention is direct intervention, right? And I want to stress that there are significantly more in-depth resources that speak to all of this on the No Kings website, nokings.org/trainings. I'm mentioning this now, not only to make sure folks are aware that this exists, but also to introduce this because we want to make sure if this is your one webinar you're attending before you go to No Kings, you're hearing something about de-escalation and have at least this in your back pocket. Right? And so I mentioned direct intervention. This can look like a few different things, right? But always making sure we are non-threatening in our body language, having our hands visible and open, using active listening, right, which can also be a tactic to delay or distract, speak in a low volume with slow movement, not ever touching any individuals, right, and maintaining a safe distance. And then always being appropriate in our response, right? We never want to escalate the situation. And so sometimes that can look like singing, which we'll talk about in a little bit, or chanting, right? And I just wanted to touch again on this briefly to make sure everyone on this call is hearing a little bit about de-escalation, knowing that in addition to an amazing training module we will be launching tonight as part of our virtual training platform, there are also really incredible resources on the No Kings website, which will provide full, extensive 90-minute trainings on these different topics. I also just briefly want to cover the different roles that you might consider. And some of this is in our pre-event gathering toolkit, which you can find on our No Kings landing page at interfaithalliance.org. When you're putting together your interfaith pre-event gathering, consider the different roles that you might need, right? Delegating is not just an important part of de-escalation, it's an important part of organizing, right? Consider who's going to not only be at the front of the room, but who's coordinating carpools, who's on food, essential in an interfaith context, who is bringing sign materials, who is publicizing, who is on safety duty, who's attending these No Kings de-escalation trainings and is keeping an eye out, right? And I hope that you keep these roles in mind, not just for your planning purposes for hosting your interfaith pre-event gathering, but also as you show up together as an interfaith contingent, an interfaith community, speaking boldly and proudly into our traditions, whether they be religiously grounded or grounded in traditions of moral conscience, consider continuing to show up as a group, right? Having a point person. So if folks have questions at the actual activation, there's somebody there who can answer them, who's a familiar face that they saw that morning or afternoon at the pre-event gathering, right? Ideally, this person has a relationship with the organizers, can connect if need be, right? Consider having somebody who's on de-escalation, having a mind toward that at the actual pre-event gathering. Also being the person, so if your group sees anything happening, they know, okay, we need to tell the marshal, but we also want to make sure that the person who's thinking about the safety of our group is aware of what's happening so they can keep an eye out for our folks, in addition to the marshals keeping an eye out for every attendee. Right? I encourage you to think about not just, again, how you can organize a meaningful pre-event experience, but also show up and continue to hold our community through the activation. And so with that, we're going to change gears a little because I know we've gotten really tangible in what we're sharing now. And we're getting tangible not just because this is information that's necessary, but because we wanted to give you a sneak peek of something we're so incredibly grateful and excited to launch this evening. And so, without further ado, I'm really excited to give y'all a first look right now at uh, our virtual training platform. Right? Not yet, but in a moment, Eden will put this link in the chat so you can get started tonight and get into some of these trainings. But I just briefly wanted to take you through what you can expect when you go on to our new training platform. And briefly before I do, I want to give a huge shout out and express gratitude to all of the incredible partners who recorded modules for these incredible trainings. And just mention that we have a great slate of trainings currently live. And over the next few weeks, you will continue to see new trainings uploaded that represent an ever-growing diversity of faith traditions, perspectives, and guidance on how we can show up in the moment. The last thing I'll say before we jump in here is that if you are looking at the all the training modules we have planned, and you'll see a few that say coming soon, and you notice, oh, there's a topic that I'm really curious about. I know folks in my community are asking about, and I would love to see it on this website. You can email training@interfaithalliance.org. That'll forward to me, Adam, and just let me know what you want to see. We'll make sure it happens. So, with that, I'm really excited to share a first look, and you're seeing this for the first time that anybody outside of the Interfaith Alliance team is seeing this, a first look at our new training platform. Right? Tangibly, your faith calls you to act, and this is how. So when you get onto our landing page, you'll put in your information and you'll be welcomed. Right? I put in my information, and the platform will remember you, will save your progress, so you don't have to go and rewatch any videos. You can pick up right where you left off. You can track your progress, and you can also get further and further toward that goal of watching all of these modules. Uh, Also with that, if you start on your laptop and then hop over to a different device, the website will be able to keep track of that and make sure that you can continue engaging with this training content on any of your devices. Now, I just want to briefly give a quick sneak peek, and I know we mentioned our in-person and virtual, more boutique trainings you can request for your community. I want to give you a quick sneak peek at what those core trainings are. Right? And we've already been so grateful to partner with amazing communities and affiliates across the country in leading some of these. We have a great training that we're already doing around the country called Interfaith Nonviolent Civil Resistance. For folks who haven't seen it yet, at the very end of last year, we actually hosted this as our 101 training, sharing for folks kind of those first steps for how to engage and be thinking about how to show up in this moment. Right? And that's all on YouTube. You can find that link in the chat. We also are going to be rolling out Reimagining Interfaith. Those 10 minutes you heard from Maggie Siddiqui that I know transformed everyone's life, because every time I hear Maggie talk about interfaith, my life is changed. That full training is going to be available to request for your community virtually or in person. We'll also be working with some amazing partner organizations to roll out a training that really gets into how faith communities can show up this year, understanding that this is an election year. And while we have a staunch commitment to nonpartisanship at our houses of worship and faith communities across the country, our job is to show up and, in the same way we're showing up for No Kings, be that voice of trust, of peace, be in a de-escalatory role, and ensure that our elections are free, are fair, and are protected, so we can live into the promise of democracy we're hoping to actualize for every American. And then finally, we're really excited to be working on and preparing to launch a training on really tangible mobilization and organizing tactics, right? How do our interfaith communities not just scale up for mass mobilization, but really lean into that organizing muscle to continue to do this work together across lines of difference? And there's a lot that you can already engage with tonight when you jump onto this training platform. We have incredible, incredible training content that's made to either supplement some full-length trainings, or if you're about to show up at No Kings and you're curious, hey, I watched the No Kings de-escalation training. I heard some of those key principles from Adam, but I just want a quick refresher. You can tune into Reverend Im's 20-minute training on de-escalation and bystander intervention. If you're a clergy person who is organizing in your community and you want to go a little bit deeper as you plan your pre-event interfaith gathering, check out an amazing training that Rabbi Danziger from the Religious Action Center of Reformed Judaism or Reverend Amy Ruman, who helps run the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, uh, separately recorded that give really incredible, tangible organizing strategies for how we do this work in congregations and lean into our deep, rich faith traditions and offer some of the theological grounding that we can uniquely lean on when we do this work. Right? There are all of these trainings and more on this platform. I just want to say thank you all to the Interfaith Alliance team for making this possible. Thank you all, the incredible folks on this call, for reaching out to us, for asking for this resource. I just want to say we hear you, and we are here to show up alongside you. And so I hope that everyone knows this is not just kind of a representation of our commitment to you as folks doing this incredible work, as folks in the field, but is an ongoing commitment to continue to support you in this work. So again, as you check out this platform tonight, please check out the modules that already exist. Take a look at the trainings you can request, consider if that's a good fit for your community, and reach out to us through that training@interfaithalliance.org email if there's a training that you're looking for that you want to see on this website. And then lastly, I'll just show our de-escalation and bystander intervention page. This is what it looks like when you jump on. All right. And so with that, I know we've talked a lot about song tonight. And before we send everybody off, wish everyone a wonderful evening or wonderful afternoon if you're tuning in from Hawaii, as I know a few folks are. Um, I just wanted to briefly offer some closing words and then give everybody a first look at an incredible training from Aaron, a leader of the Resistance Revival Chorus in New York City. So, just to close out here, I want to say thank you, first and foremost, not just for showing up to No Kings, for doing this work day in and day out, for your deep commitment to interfaith, multiracial democracy, but for showing up as your full selves, right? We know and have heard affirmed tonight how showing up as people of faith and diverse beliefs, leaning into our traditions that for some of us are hundreds or thousands of years old, is not only essential in contributing to this vast, diverse movement for democracy in the United States, but it exemplifies the democracy that we're fighting for. By showing up as your full selves, as people of faith and traditions of conscience, you are leaning into the most core form of patriotism that we can lean into, exemplifying the diversity of our country and leaning in, saying we are choosing democracy and we are acting it out in real time. Again, there are so many resources we want to make sure are available to you. We will send all of the links that you saw this evening via email. And with that, I'm going to share my screen one last time and turn it over to the incredible Aaron, who has recorded a module that you can find on this training platform, who's going to close us out with some song.
Hi, my name is Erin Maya. I am one of the musical directors for the Resistance Survival Chorus. I'm also a singer-songwriter, sound healing practitioner, and I'm so glad to be here today. I think of God as sound, and so I think that music is so parallel to God. And so that relationship and also the use of music in different faiths is so powerful and useful. And it just transforms the way that we interact with each other inside of a faith, but also outside of that faith, right? Like music transcends boundaries, it transcends walls. And I think that my faith and also the music that came out of my church, which is gospel, which I still listen to all the time, and which I think stylistically, um, not only the style of gospel, but the style of teaching and bringing people in. It's never exclusionary. It's always like, you are welcome. Come sing together. Let's strengthen this movement in whatever way we can. So we're stronger together. Our voices are all unique, are all powerful, and together we're stronger. And so whatever the message is or whatever the goal is, together we can get the message further. So I think when we want to try to bring music into organizing spaces like trainings, rallies, community gatherings, when we want to do that, then I think that some of the tips that I like to try to incorporate are similar to the tips that I like to use to bring people who might be overwhelmed or feeling isolated into the space. So you want to have songs that have repetition in them. Simple melodies are really great. For instance, like This Little Light of Mine, that melody, most people grew up with it. And even if they didn't, they know it by default. And so if you can have songs that have recognizable melodies, that's really good. It brings people in. And it strengthens the crowd because again, you have that familiarity and then you have the group is already created. And so it strengthens itself. So that's one, I think. And then two, I think that having a mix of songs, so maybe they're not all slow, maybe some of them have like a little bit more rhythm, but things that people can grasp onto that are familiar to them in terms of music that they can identify with. So you don't want to just have songs that are just upbeat because some people are not going to resonate with that. But you might have some songs that are upbeat, some songs that are slower. So you kind of touch everybody in the room. And I think those are probably two of the best tips or tricks that I have. So the song I'm going to teach is called This Joy. This Joy was originally written by Shirley Caesar. And the Resistance Survival Chorus sings our version of it. And it goes like this. This joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Oh, this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. This joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Oh, now the world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. So that's how the song goes. And then we add different words in. So we say this love or this strength or this voice. And we change every verse with a new word. And so we bring those in. So I hope whoever's listening to this is joining in and singing. And so it's actually to the same general melody as This Little Light of Mine. So get that song in your heart and then just put it to these words. This love that I have, the world didn't give it to me. This love that I have, the world didn't give it to me. This love that I have, the world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. This strength that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Oh, this strength that I have, the world didn't give it to me. This strength that I have, the world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. All this joy, this joy, this joy that I had. The world didn't give it to me. Oh, this joy that I had. The world didn't give it to me. This joy that I have. The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it. The world can't take it away. So this song is not really a song. It's a quote by Asada Shakur. And it's a quote that I took and that a lot of people in the movement space know this quote. And I arranged it into a chant for the chorus. It goes like this. It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. So we're literally just singing that over and over again. And so the words are, it is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Again, one more time. It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. And if you want to get funky, you can repeat that at the end. We have nothing to lose but our chains. 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 And before I go, I should mention that the Resistance Survival Chorus has an album called This Joy. It came out in 2020 and it's available on all streaming platforms. And we also have a vinyl, but that's where you can listen to the song This Joy as well as many others.